We mentioned affordable housing before, but let's start with this. We face here in California a housing crisis with low inventory and high prices across the board. Critics often cite building regulations and zoning laws as barriers to increasing inventory. Others oppose rent control and more government intervention. So, do you believe we should let the housing market balance itself, or do we really need more regulation? Mr. Garvey?
No.
No. Mr. Garvey,
Mr. Garvey.
right?
Well, I think this gets back to more of a local issue, releasing land leases on a local basis, working with builders, giving them incentives to build housing. Mr. Schiff in his website talks about housing, affordable housing, is just build more housing, but it's much more than that. But if we do start to mention a federal issue, I think this is where government becomes over-involved in a situation to be worked out on that local level.
Mr. Schiff? I'm not sure I followed that answer, but here's what I would say. I met with a young woman in the north of the state. She told me that she graduated from college about 10 years earlier. She was still paying down her student loans. Her rent kept going up and up and up, and rents are going up in rural areas as fast as they're going up anywhere else in the state. Between the two, she had barely enough to get by, and she was terrified. I think she speaks for millions of people. We need to build a lot more housing in California, and my opponent may say, well, the government doesn't have much of a role in that, but we do. We can incentivize the development of housing. We can help break this logjam, and we're going to have to. The problem will not solve itself. We should also be making a greater federal direct investment in housing. And we also should incentivize local government agencies to make decisions quicker on housing. We're going to have to do all of this and more and treat this as the urgency that it is. It is my top priority to bring down the cost of housing in California.
Real quick, how about renters? What are you going to do to help renters? Let's start with Mr. Garvey.
Proposition 3, is that what we're
No,
addressing
just
now?
in what your policies would be to help people who rent.
Well,
30 seconds.
it's interesting that young men and women, young families trying to buy the single greatest asset they'll ever have can't do that because of inflation, because of the economy. And I think once we get that economy roaring again, we get supply side influence, free market capitalization, put money in their pockets, they'll be able to buy homes and be able to rent at an affordable price. And I think that's where it starts.
Okay, 30 seconds, Mr. Schiff, on rent, and then Gabrielle, you have a follow-up.
Look, if you're lucky enough to buy a home, you get to write off a lot of your mortgage as a result. If you're a renter, you get no help. I don't think that's right. I would like to see a renter's tax credit so that renters also get some help with their rent. I'd also like to see us expand Section 8 vouchers. We've made a lot of progress in moving homeless veterans into shelter because we put such a focus and priority on veterans, as we should. But everyone deserves a place to live, and I think dramatically expanding Section 8 vouchers, making them available for people who need them, making sure that landlords can't turn down people who want to use a voucher.
All right.
This
Thank
is
you,
part
sir.
of the answer.
Thank you. Gabrielle, really quickly.
Yeah, so simply put, more regulation? Do we need more housing regulation in the state of California, yes or no?
15
No.
seconds each,
We
max.
need less regulation. I think this is the problem. I think the more you regulate, the more you control. This man and his party wants to control this country, and they want to do this. This is almost a tyranny in which the government suppresses the people by controlling.
More regulation, the answer is no, far from it. What we need are tax incentives to build housing. What we need are local governments that treat this as the urgency that it is, that will make quick approvals or quick refusals. It's not going to be appropriate to build everything everywhere. But a quick answer is much better than a long, lingering maybe or a no.
Thank you.
Local government needs to act fast.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. We're going to take a quick break from this U.S. Senate Candidate Forum. We'll be right back with another half hour of questioning. Welcome back to the U.S. Senate Candidate Forum, hosted by ABC7 and the League of Women Voters of California. We'll continue our questions now. I'm going to ask for Mr. Schiff and then Mr. Garvey. Who do you support for president and why? Mr. Schiff, you begin.
I support Vice President Kamala Harris. I think she has a strong plan to make the economy work for everyone. I think she's a good and decent human being. I think she will stand up to bullies around the world like Vladimir Putin. She has earned my vote. On the other hand, Donald Trump, I think, was a disastrous president. I think he has threatened our democracy. He says he wants to be a dictator on day one. He wants to use the Justice Department to go after his political enemies. He demonizes groups of people. Right now it's the Haitians, and who will it be tomorrow? Americans want someone who is good and decent and ethical, who knows right from wrong, who's capable of telling the truth as the President of the United States. And the choice to me is very clear, and it's Kamala Harris.
Mr. Garvey.
You've been trying to paint me for a year now into one corner or the other. And I've said, I'm running a Steve Garvey campaign. I make my decisions based on what I think is best for the people. I did vote for Donald Trump 3 times. I believe he's the best man for the job. We were much safer. We had a better economy. We had more to look forward to. People could dream. But I can't imagine, Mr. Schiff, how you could get up every morning and have one mission, and that's to go after Donald Trump. You've been made a proxy by the higher-ups in your party, whether it's going after him concerning impeachment, all these things. And if you think about it for a minute, how can you think about one man every day and focus on that when you've got millions of people in California to take care of?
Mr.
I think it's unconscionable. And like I said before, he lied to 300 million people when he was going through that whole process of trying to get Donald Trump impeached.
Mr. Schiff, 30 seconds.
Mr. Garvey likes that particular attack because that's what Trump likes to say. It's his way of telling MAGA viewers out there, hey, I'm one of you. That's not what Californians are looking for, Mr. Garvey. Mr. Garvey, I stood up to a corrupt president. And yes, I investigated him. I impeached him. I led the trial in the Senate. And when he incited a violent attack on the Capitol, and I was there that day, Mr. Garvey. I was there on January 6th as those insurrectionists were breaking down the doors and windows. The fact that you think that's perfectly okay, that you still want to support the guy who incited that violent attack, that tells me that you would never take your oath of office seriously, as I do.
I'll give you 30 seconds, Mr. Garvey, and then we're going to move on. 30 seconds.
I've left him speechless.
You know, because I'm trying to think about all the things that you lost. You know, when you step up and you talk like you talk right now, it tells those hardworking people in California that you don't care about them. You care about something else. And I think that you were banned from the Intelligence Committee. You were censored. Only one of 3 congressmen to be censored in the history of the Congress. And if you're elected to the U.S. Senate, it'll be the most toxic Senate in the history of the Senate.
You know what it tells them, Mr. Garvey? It tells them that I will stand up and defend our democracy, and that you won't.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to move on from support for different candidates. Now we're going to talk about fentanyl. Warren, you have a question for Mr. Garvey.
122,000 deaths across the country last year were attributed to fentanyl. As of yesterday, there have been 62 deaths just in Fresno County. Legislation recently passed requires the president to sanction cartel members who are engaged in fentanyl trafficking and those who funnel precursor chemicals from China. But fentanyl is already here on our streets and it's killing people. How do you plan to address the fentanyl crisis if you're elected?
Well, first of all, the majority of the fentanyl comes from China. It's precursor there. It's brought to Mexico. It's put together in Mexico, and then it's driven across the border, where it's driven to cartels for distribution that are killing Americans. Let's get back to securing the border, number one. Let's deal with Mexico honestly and straightforward. And let's deal with China on this. Let's stop being nice with China and nice with Mexico. Americans are being killed because the borders are open. Let's face it. We've got to get back to securing the border. Fentanyl, single worst drug ever to come across the borders from anywhere that are killing our people.
Mr. Schiff?
Prior to my service in the legislature, I was a prosecutor here in Los Angeles for 6 years. I prosecuted people smuggling drugs into this country from Mexico. I've experienced being on the front lines of the fight against those drug smugglers who are ruining countless American lives. Fentanyl has been a terrible curse. My wife Eve and I have 2 kids. When they're in college, we worried like every other parent that something might happen to one of our kids. It's terrifying, and for all too many, something did happen tragically. We need to strengthen our interdiction efforts at the border, that's true, but let's be honest about what's happening at the border. Most fentanyl that's smuggled in this country comes through ports of entry, carried by Americans. And we need to go after that, and we need to go after the international cartels that are trafficking in this death. And yes, we need to go after China or anyone who is manufacturing these precursors so that we can protect American lives.
All right, Kristen Z, your question for Mr. Schiff.
Congressman Schiff, on Forbes 2024 World Billionaires list, California has 86 billionaires, the most of any state. While the average income of the top 1% has risen significantly, middle-income Californians have seen their earnings and their buying power decline. What's your view on the tax burden for different income groups, and how would you address this growing wealth gap in our state?
Some years ago, I had the opportunity to meet Warren Buffett, one of not California's billionaires, but one of the wealthiest people in the world. We discussed how the tax rate for his secretary was half of his own effective tax rate. He didn't think that was right, and he is correct about that. That's wrong, it's immoral, and it's terrible economics. If you look at it, a handful of the richest families in America own almost half of the nation's wealth. And the reason it has gotten this bad is we have a tax code that is terribly unfair to working people and middle-income families. I would change that. That Trump tax cut that Mr. Garvey supports, that just made the rich richer and it made corporations wealthier, but it did nothing for most families. In fact, Californians, middle-class Californians got a tax increase when the SALT deduction, the state local tax deduction, was capped in a punitive act by the former president, affecting blue states like California. I would raise that cap. I would support child tax credits that lift kids out of poverty, and I would make the very wealthy and corporations pay their fair share.
Mr. Garvey, taxation.
Taxation. 4 years ago, taxation was the sweet spot for this country. Vibrant economy, men and women going to work every day and believing that they could fulfill their dreams. And it's not that way now. Because an administration and because this man hasn't done anything over the last 24 years on any of these things that have given us any consistency in the life. What this state has become is a welfare and a wealthy state. But let's let those people who, and getting back to what everybody talks about now are small businesses. Let's get back to taxation that allows small businesses to be vivid again and contribute. I think I'm good with the Trump tax. I think it worked. We're worse off than we were 4 years ago. And let's get back to people who are successful, be able to make that much money, but they will pay their fair tax. Under my time in the U.S. Senate, 6 years, I'll make sure that happens.
Gabriela, your question for Mr. Garvey.
Latino voters. According to the National Association of Latino Elected Officials, NALEO, the Educational Fund says 29% of registered voters in California are Latino. That's nearly 1 in 3. So why should Latinos vote for either of you? What part of your political platform do you think resonates the most with our Latino community?
Well, I came here over 55 years ago, put on a Dodger uniform, and I think most people know played 20 years. And over that time, the emergence of Fernando Valenzuela and the Latino players increased attendance at the Dodger Stadium by 40%. And the last debate we had, the question was, Latino voters don't believe you really care about it. And I think Mr. Schiff said, well, we haven't. And I looked at the camera like I will now and say, when I get back to the U.S. Senate, the Latino community will be my priority, and I will fight for them. And if we get that supply side economics in line and get this vibrant economy, the money will go into their pockets, and then know who really cares about it.
Mr. Schiff.
Gabriel, in my opportunities to meet with Latino business leaders around the state, what they've told me is that the struggles they face are the same, in many respects, as every other community. When housing prices go up, they have to they're disproportionately impacted in the struggle to find housing. When the cost of food and gas and groceries go up and medicine, they're often left wanting. But more than that, there are strong regional needs that I'm also trying to meet. Latinos are most disproportionately impacted by the Tijuana River ecological disaster that's affecting their health. Similarly, in the Salton Sea area, Latino communities deeply adversely impacted by that environmental justice. In the Central Valley, hospitals like the Madera Hospital are shutting down because we're not adequately funding rural healthcare. Latinos are losing access to healthcare, life-saving healthcare. In the north of the state, lack of broadband access means a lot of Latino families get left behind when it comes to education. I'm going to fight for the Latino community. I'm very proud to have the endorsement of La Opinion in this race. This is going to be a top priority for me.
Warren, your question for Mr. Schiff.
Let's talk healthcare. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention indicates that more than 8% of Americans, 27 million people, lacked health insurance at the beginning of 2024. That number is expected to increase as protections linked to the pandemic end. What is your plan to help those without health insurance, and how will you protect those with pre-existing conditions? Mr. Schiff.
My wife and I had the experience that all too many families have of our daughter coming into a room in the middle of the night bleeding, and we had to rush her to a hospital. She was fine. She got treatment. She was fine. Too many families, though, in California and around the country don't have access to that kind of good, immediate, quality health care. I think we should make Medicare available for all who want to participate in it. Folks who don't want to participate shouldn't have to, but those who want to should have that opportunity. What's more, we should continue to negotiate down the price of medicine through Medicare negotiations. I'm going to fight to strengthen Medicare and Social Security. Mr. Garvey says we should, quote, cut these entitlements. That means cutting Medicare for seniors, cutting Social Security for seniors, these incredibly important healthcare and anti-poverty programs. That's not where Californians are. That's not where I am. My father passed away at 96 this year. He relied on Medicare. He relied on Social Security. He relied on VA healthcare. I want to make sure that's strong for future generations.
Mr. Garvey.
Let's make sure that we have a vivid and strong Medi-Cal and Medicaid and expanded Medicare. I think that's where all this starts. Let's not do away with competition between healthcare companies. I'm on several boards that deal with healthcare. Again, we got to get back in to this competitive nature of these United States. Regulations have constrained people competing against each other, and we become stagnant. Let's get back to free market capitalization, where these insurance companies, healthcare companies can compete for lower prices so it'll benefit all people.
Can healthcare companies not compete now?
They're restrained by regulations, and I think that's one of the problems with where we are in America right now is we need to deregulate. Once this administration took over the first day, you saw a significant amount of regulation at all the key areas that affect our lives.
A quick question for both of you. There's
I want to respond to the last one because I was puzzled to hear Mr. Garvey say he was supporting expanding Medicare. Because earlier in the campaign, Mr. Garvey, you said you wanted to, quote, cut these entitlements. What entitlements were you saying we should cut, if not Medicare and Social Security?
Where are you getting your information?
From you, Mr. Garvey.
No, not from me. You know, when this campaign started, that first day I announced, you came out with a snarky remark that, oh, he was born on third base. Meaning that I came from a wealthy family. Well, let me tell you, let me finish. This is going to be about how you disparage my mother. A hardworking woman who got up every day and took 2 buses to go to work. Came home and took care of her son and her husband, who she helped get out the door being a Greyhound bus driver and an IPU club. So this is what you do.
I
You
have
lie
nothing but the kind of things
constantly.
to say about your
Let's
mother.
just face it, this is who you are, this is what you do.
We're talking about your wanting to cut entitlements.
all right. I think we're getting a little far afield here. Let's continue. I have a question for both of you. Both presidential candidates have, at one time or another, come out in favor of abolishing the filibuster. The filibuster has been used in the past to stymie civil rights legislation, voting rights legislation. It's been used to stall or stop appointments to either the cabinet or the federal courts. I want to know both of your position on whether or not you would vote to abolish the filibuster, and I will begin with Mr. Garvey.
Filibuster is a vibrant way for the minority voice to have an opinion. And in this country now, this administration and the progressives are trying to deconstruct the Constitution. They're trying to pack the Supreme Court. They're trying to do away with the filibuster, do away with the Electoral College. All these things are part of this vibrant, single greatest document in the world. That's the Constitution. On his watch, all he's talked about is doing away with all of these things, packing the court, especially packing the court, okay, to take away the real judicial voice of America. And I think that this is unconscionable at a time when we are around the world, never been threatened more, never been in more danger, that you should constantly talk about the Constitution, and now you can deconstruct it.
Mr. Schiff, for or against abolishing the filibuster?
I'm for abolishing the filibuster because, Mark, if we're ever going to restore voting rights, we're going to have to abolish the filibuster. If we're going to want to take meaningful action on gun safety legislation, with universal background checks, we're going to have to abolish the filibuster. If we want comprehensive immigration reform, we're going to have to abolish the filibuster. If we want to restore reproductive freedom to millions of women in California, we're going to have to abolish the filibuster. And as to packing the court, Mr. Garvey, in case you weren't paying attention, it's already been packed. It was packed with reactionary justices who took away the reproductive freedom for millions of people. That court ought to be term limited. There should be enforceable sanctions, ethics sanctions, an enforceable ethics code for that court, like any other federal employee. And yes, that court should be rebalanced because I don't want my kids growing up under this kind of a reactionary and partisan Supreme Court.
To the people listening, both in this state
30
and
seconds.
around the country, what he's talking about is eliminating free speech. This administration is constantly talking about taking away the free speech of the people, doing away with the Second Amendment, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is under attack by Mr. Schiff and his party. That's why you need a voice like mine in the U.S. Senate starting next January.
Mr. Schiff, I'll give you 30 seconds and then we'll move on.
I appreciate that. Look, I don't know where he's getting half this stuff. He wants to abolish the First Amendment. He wants to stop people's right of First Amendment speech. That's gibberish. Here's what I do want. I want a Supreme Court that we can once again respect. That is enlarging our rights, not doing away with them. I don't want voter restrictions put in place so that eligible voters can't vote. Another generation of Jim Crow laws. I don't want that. I want meaningful gun safety legislation. I want strong action against climate change. This is, I believe, what Californians also want.
All right, thank you for your time. Kristen, your question for Mr. Schiff.
Thank you, Mark. Congressman Schiff, in many national conversations, San Francisco is portrayed as crime-ridden and unsafe. But FBI crime data shows it's not actually among the top 100 most violent cities in the U.S. Similarly, California is sometimes characterized as a failing state, despite being the world's 5th largest economy and a center for innovation and diversity. So as a candidate seeking to represent California and its people, all its people, what is your view of California? And based on that view, how would you build a better California?
Well, I realize that Californians are struggling. I understand that many of you are working harder than ever and having a difficult time getting by. And in the big cities, San Francisco is not alone. I think all big cities in California and many around the country are facing the same post-pandemic struggles to come back. I want to work with community leaders and stakeholders in every part of this Golden State. There's going to be a headline one day, San Francisco is back. There'll be another, Oakland is back. All of our cities are back. And it means that we're going to have to encourage and incentivize people to come back to these big, beautiful cities. California is this incredible hub of innovation. I want to keep the entrepreneurial economy here in California. It's given us all tremendous economic dividends. We want to keep that strong. Yes, it needs to be regulated to protect our society, to protect our workplace. but I want these jobs in California. I don't want them exported overseas. And again, I want to follow Dianne Feinstein's model. She sat down with people. She got to yes. You got to be able to work with people on both sides of the aisle and deliver. That's what I've done, and that's what I'll do.
Thank you, Mr. Schiff. Mr. Garvey.
Mr. Schiff, you're no Dianne Feinstein. I remember when this state was the heartbeat of America, and now it's just a murmur. It's because of the suppression of elected officials, career officials like you, who now have forced good people who have come to this state, came here to dream, knowing that every day, 85% of Californians wake up each morning and realize they're only going to break even or going to lose money. And it's shrinkflation, it's suppression of energy and the voice of the people. And I think that this country is only going to start to grow when we start to build consensus. Getting back to what I believe in, and that's common sense, compassion, consensus, and not voting 98% down party lines, being able to reach across the aisle and stick out your hand. And I'll do this as next elected U.S. Senate. I'll go to all 99 of the Senate, and stick out my hand and say, I want to work with you for the best interest of your state and my state in this country.
Mr.
I
Schiff,
think a lot of them.
I'm going to give you each 15 more seconds. Mr. Schiff.
I'd like to respond to what he said. And Mr. Garvey, I knew Dianne Feinstein. Dianne Feinstein was a friend of mine, and you're right. I would never pretend to be the equal of Dianne Feinstein. She was a giant. She was a giant. But I'll tell you something about Dianne Feinstein, about my own record. Like Dianne Feinstein, I've worked hard across the aisle to get mass transit built, to pass California's Patient Bill of Rights, which I wrote. I worked to get the early earthquake warning system set up. I brought millions back to California for housing.
We've got to get to closing statements.
If I could just say, well, Mr. Garvey was signing baseballs for the last 37 years. I was seeing presidents of both parties and governors of both parties sign my bills into law.
And for 24 years, you've only been known for one thing, and that's impeaching somebody else. That's unconscionable.
All right, now we're going to get to our closing statements. I'm going to give each candidate 1 minute to present their closing statements on why they should be elected by Californians to the United States Senate. Mr. Garvey, you are first.
Well, it's been 55 years since you and I first met, going in Dodger Stadium September 1st of 1969, putting on a Dodger uniform, playing for 20 years, San Diego and LA, growing businesses, family, being involved in charities and understanding what California is all about. I listened to a song, Someone Like You by Van Morrison, and it reminded me of the day I decided to run. That someone like you is the people of California who've been suppressed and regulated, who need a new, fresh, young voice. Somebody who'll get up every day and swing for the fences for you, and that you know in my heart and in my prayers, I will be a 6-year senator that'll make a difference in your life, in your family, your future, and your children. God bless you. And this has been the greatest journey of my life. I need your vote. Go to stevegarvey.com.
Mr. Schiff, 1 minute.
Thank you again for hosting the debate tonight. I've been very proud to represent California in the U.S. Congress. I'm proud of my record of delivering for the people of California. I'm proud of building light rail. Proud of passing California's Patient Bill of Rights. I'm proud of bringing back millions to this state to build housing, to get things done again in California. I'm proud to have authored legislation that helps us attack wildfires and expand health care to millions of people. Californians deserve a senator who has a track record of delivering and getting things done for the people of this state. But California also has a right to expect that their senator will stand up for our Constitution, for our democracy, and yes, will take on even a corrupt president, which was my obligation, my constitutional obligation, and I would do so again if the need should arise. But I've been enormously proud to represent many of you in the House of Representatives. I'd be very proud to represent every part of this big, beautiful state in the U.S. Senate, and I ask for your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Schiff and Mr. Garvey. Thank both of you for this great forum. We'd like to thank our co-sponsor, the League of Women Voters of California, and our media partner, Univision LA. Additional thanks to our sister stations, KGO in San Francisco and KFSN in Fresno. A reminder, Election Day, November 5th, just 4 weeks from today. Early in-person voting starts at the end of the month. Vote by mail ballots must be postmarked by Election Day. We thank you for joining us. Have a good evening. Get out there and vote. Good night.